Hello and welcome to another special episode from the Honest Football Podcast. The first of what will probably be many in the Championship this season, as we've got our first sacking of the season. It's one that I predicted pre-season that we all suggested might happen. It is Nottingham Forest who have sacked Sabri Lamouchi and replaced him 30 minutes later with Chris Hughton. So we're going to get the boys' reaction to the fact that Lamouchi's been sacked and then replaced quite quickly with a very good proven manager. But let's firstly get your reaction. Of course, it came yesterday. Sabri Lamouchi sacked. Craig, what were your initial thoughts? Surprise?
Yes and no. To be honest, it's one of those where I quite like Lamouchi from last season. I thought Forest played some really good stuff. We went to watch Forest against Luton in the Czech League club last season. Yeah, they played some really, really good stuff. But obviously, they've lost a few players from last season. Matty Cash has obviously gone to Aston Villa. That's the main player that's obviously gone. Brought a few players in, Lyle Taylor, controversially, and I don't think that's a sort of signing that Lamouchi actually made. Yeah. To be honest, it's not. I don't think they needed to strengthen in that area, considering they've got Lewis Graham is a proven Championship goalscorer. However, with back end of after lockdown, the form just completely utterly dipped, and they somehow lost a 6-goal swing on the final day, and they haven't recovered from it. I think if they had a longer summer with pre-season, I think he might have been okay. But because it's this season's short and sharp, and restarted again, it's just carried on. And when you lose your first 4 games, their worst run ever at the start of the season, you are going to get the chop. And it's a big club like Forest that happens. To replace him with Chris Hughton, excellent choice, to be honest.
Well, we'll come to that in a minute. But Charlie, I want to come back to you. And it's something that Craig alluded to. I thought he was going to answer my second question as well, which would have annoyed me.
What was the second question?
Well, my second question, which is for Charlie, is after what happened at the end of last season, it was obviously Forest gave him a slight chance to redeem himself at the start of this year. But based on the very abrupt change in transfer policy, I would suggest that potentially Sabri Lamouchi didn't have much of a say in who came in this summer.
No, and I think the thing is, I think with regard to that, it seems like he'd lost the dressing room anyway. And I know that's a cliche, but genuinely, you can't have that quality of players that he had and then have such a dip in form. And maybe some of that is, as a manager, you don't just look, Craig, you're obviously a manager now, you don't just look at, I suppose even in your job actually, Dan, as well as a manager, you don't just look at what their skills are and their attributes, it's how their personality fits. Yeah. Do these people, I don't know who's making the decisions at Forest, clearly not the manager, but whoever these people are, do they take that into account? Because, with all due respect, I'm only using an example, not scapegoat, but Lyle Taylor's not necessarily got the best reputation for being a team player. And yet he's the signing they make when they're on a bit of a dip of form as it is. The issue with them, even in the previous games, with the exception of the beginning of this season, even towards the end of the season, they were still scoring goals. They were just leaking them at the other end. I think that was the problem. So bringing in, like you say, a striker, and I'm not blaming it on Lyle Taylor, but just as an example. So to be honest, there was clearly a disconnect between whoever's making it, whether it be a director of football or even, God forbid, the actual chairman and the manager. In some ways, I don't blame him for then. He was quite open about it. Was it a team from Qatar or something like that that made an approach for him? Lamouchi, he was quite open about that before he'd actually even been sacked, hadn't he? I think he said there was talk of that. So I don't blame him, to be honest. It's probably, once you're in that position, I don't like using the cliche, but it is pretty much untenable. If you're not making decisions about the players coming in and then you're still expected to try and set them onto some sort of tactic that you can't necessarily work around, clearly that's what's happened. So I don't think he necessarily should shoulder all of the blame of what's happened to Forest's poor start, or poor finish and poor start to last season and this season. So Hughton's a great manager. We'll move on to that. I do think maybe Hughton would be a bit stronger with whoever's, making these transfer decisions, because otherwise I can't imagine a manager of Hughton's quality is going to stand there and take maybe the same crap that the Lamouchi had to take in terms of picking players and for transfer targets and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, completely agree. We will come on to the owners and the appointment of Chris Hughton. But the last thing is we have got to talk about on the pitch, because 3 points in the last 6 games, including no wins at the end of last season, to fall dramatically out of the playoffs. And then they started this season losing a League Cup tie and 4 league games in a row. Ironically, probably their best performance was the second half of the last game against Bristol City, where they had 21 shots, and how they didn't get a point, I don't know. But it's still 5 defeats in a row. And after the end to last season, we all sort of said it in the pre-season predictions, he was never going to get long, was he, Craig?
No. As what I alluded to earlier, but you don't lose a 6-goal swing in the final day. You don't. I know you're concentrating your own game, but obviously Swansea were scoring, but all you had to do was to shut up shop for the last 10 odd minutes, and he didn't do that. He gambled, and it all backfired. So the writing was on the wall from there. Regardless of this season, I can't. Even we said in pre-season, couldn't imagine Forest starting so poorly.
Yeah, it is tough. If you don't want me jumping in quickly, it's tough though because Forest necessarily haven't in the last 15 years haven't really been in and around any sort of great shakes. You know, I think even the 7th finish, I know it obviously ended badly, but it was like their best finish in the last 7 or 8 years or something like that. So it's still done some good work there. I suppose it is, I mean, you know yourselves as managers, it is on a knife edge. He could have gambled against Swansea, 1-3-2, and then he's a hero. Do you know what I mean? So that's the nature of the job, but I don't think he's necessarily done the worst job. But then for me, there's something else must have happened because you couldn't have got them as high as he had, and it all just suddenly unravelled.
He was top a few times last season. I think when we went to watch him, they were top, or close to top.
Yeah, when we went to watch Forest Luton, they were 3rd, and the win took them just a couple of points behind. They were being talked about for automatic promotion that day.
Yeah, so something obviously from January, to be honest, well, I'll say post, like come lockdown, because obviously they were doing fine. Something's clearly happened during those 4 or 5 months behind the scenes, obviously, for it to completely collapse. You could say it's the owner, you could say it's Lamouchi's changing his tactics probably a little bit. I don't know. Maybe players were so convinced that they're getting play of football. Who knows? But end of the day, manager's been sacked for his poor form. And I said, I do feel sorry for him. I think he's a very, very good manager. I thought he brought something new to the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll struggle getting another job somewhere, as we mentioned. Whether it'll be the Championship, I doubt to start with, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in England at some point.
Barnsley. He's going to Barnsley.
I don't think he'll be going to Barnsley somewhere. But let's move on to the board and the Chris Hughton appointment, because, I mean, you mentioned it off camera before we started, Craig, about the speed of Nottingham Forest statements with their regular sackings. I think this half an hour one you said didn't beat their last one, because that was 18 minutes, wasn't it, for Lamouchi coming in. So it's an interesting scenario, Craig, isn't it? So tell me what you think of Chris Hughton to start with.
I'm a big fan of Chris Hughton. We've seen him do his work at Newcastle, and obviously he had Birmingham for that season, but took Newcastle up, won the Championship with them, took Norwich up, won the Championship with them, took Brighton up. All right, they should have won it on the final day, but they lost it. But however, a club like Brighton's never been in the Premier League before. He took them up. They played some really good football. Obviously, he's had some brilliant coaches under him as well. Obviously, Nathan Jones was with Chris Hughton for a bit. So look how Nathan Jones is now managing the Championship himself. Yeah, so he's got a great track record. He does play football the right way. I think Forest, it might take a little bit of time. He's only got a week or so now of the transfer window. If he needs to find some players that he's used to or suits his style of play, that's probably why they've done it now, bring Hughton in rather than keep Lamouchi in for another week, because then the transfer window will be closed. For Chris Hughton point of view, I think it's a fantastic appointment. It's surprising because somehow Hughton didn't get a job last season, which really surprised me, considering there's about 20 managerial changes last season. And somehow Chris Hughton, well, you were convinced last season Chris Hughton was getting the Bristol City job.
Oh, I can't believe it.
So it's really surprising he's taken his time. Maybe he just didn't want to rush back into football yet, especially after lockdown. Obviously, he was doing commentary for Sky for a few games, but now he's got 42 odd games left to go. I think Forest will be fine now, to be honest. They'll get him out. And I think I predict them for the playoffs. I think they'll be up there again.
Yeah, I couldn't argue with Craig. I mean, I said the same thing. I said early managerial sacking, replacement, and then up in momentum for the playoffs. Charlie, you had them for the playoffs as well, I believe, did you?
Second automatic.
Sorry, second automatic.
He needs to do a lot of work between now and May.
He might have just saved the day in time. But the thing I was going to say on a more serious note is, with 42 games to go, it's early enough that anywhere's still possible. So it doesn't harm you just yet.
No. I was just going to say, if we're assuming there's some, not ill discipline, but there's some issue with the squad of players. If there was any manager you'd probably have in who you think could rectify that and unify a team and work with players who maybe aren't necessarily all put in the same direction, he would be your man. He's done that at lots of different clubs that he's been at. Newcastle was in a bit of disarray when he went there, and he stabilised them. So, and I think for him, Forest is an attractive club, isn't it? We've been there to the ground, but there's a whole institution, there's a whole history that comes with Forest that you don't necessarily get with loads of other English clubs. So, I think it's as attractive for him as what it is for him being attractive for them, if that makes sense.
My only negative, it's not a negative of Chris Hughton, to be honest. It's a more of a board thing. I think Cody's probably going to ask that question in a second about the timings. I don't like it when Obviously, the manager gets sacked. That's fine. I don't like it when it's so. They've already got a new guy in within 30 minutes, 18 minutes. I don't like that. Obviously, the manager probably hasn't even left yet, and they've already got a new guy in, and it just proves that they've been lining him up for probably 2-3 weeks now. It's not Chris Hughton. I'm not blaming Chris Hughton at all. It's the board that's obviously they made that decision. Where you look at Barnsley on the other hand, obviously I think they probably knew Struber was going to go to New York Red Bulls, so they probably would have someone close eye just to, right, okay, let's have a look at this person, and then we'll go and approach them. The speed on that is ridiculous for me.
I don't want to use my favourite saying of being devil's advocate, but actually, if you compare the two situations, I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just putting it out there because there'll be people watching this who'll probably ask the same question. Are Barnsley being naive in not having someone lined up and wasting that transfer window time? And actually, you're both in charge of people in your jobs, both of you two. Actually, is that good management to have a quick replacement swiftly? So then there is a quick transition. There's a straight into it, right? You've got someone in there straight away. Actually, is that good leadership from the club? Because they're trying to get them pushing right. I'm just asking that sort of question, really.
Well,
Barnsley, the first one we sort of said is, actually, who's going to come in? We're not sure. Well, that's a bit of a tough one. Who's going to go to Barnsley? That kind of thing.
I don't think Barnsley had done any transfer business during the summer.
But that's my point. No. If the manager knows he's probably on his way out and they haven't got anything else lined up in, have they wasted a window? I'm just sort of putting that out for debate more than anything, really. I don't know what you two think. It's quite specific to your jobs what you do in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you could argue it's good management. It's something that generally just hasn't been accepted in football, has it? With players, you would expect it. A player's going, well, who's replacing him is the first question. With managers, it seems to be a bit more of an old school view. Yeah, but I mean, I completely understand it. You would always have managers on your list. If our manager goes for whatever reason, these are the people we'd want as it stands. You must have that list at every football club. That would be my opinion on it.
Yeah, as soon as the manager goes, you discuss it straight away. So obviously with Chris Hughton, he's probably the best manager available for the Championship right now.
Yeah. I suppose just to add to that, there's the fear as well with someone like Chris Hughton, if he's available, there's going to be other managers going soon. This is the start of it. Yeah. Do you nab him now before a bigger club, not bigger, but I know another big club loses their manager as well? I don't know.
I mean, it's a fairly reasonable suggestion. And as you've mentioned, and as we alluded to at the start, this will probably be the first of many because the merry-go-round has just begun thanks to Nottingham Forest. I've got 2 more questions. The first one is for Charlie. Now, Craig alluded to it in his answer earlier on. Chris Hughton, the only negative reaction I saw to him being appointed was this tag of him being a defensive manager in brackets. Now, I know the last couple of months at Brighton, he had to keep them up because they were in 17th place. But generally, and it's something that you as a coach, Charlie, will probably be able to comment on well, is the difference between direct football and defensive football is something that seems to be misunderstood quite a lot. Now, Chris Hughton's side, as Craig mentioned, at Newcastle, at Norwich, at Birmingham, and at a few other clubs at times, and even early on at Brighton when they came up, they played good stuff. So is it fair to say that the sort of negative press he gets for being a defensive manager is probably a little bit harsh, to be honest?
Yeah, you need that, though. You can't, especially nowadays, you can't do the Kevin Keegan approach to game. You can, but you end up like Brentford and there's a good chance you're blowing it near the end. So I think Forest, we've discussed it earlier on, that they do have issues at the back, not massive, but it's enough that they're losing games.
Yeah.
They're not bad going forward. So actually, if that's his expertise, inverted commas, and that's his style, then actually, I suppose you can have a blend of the two. They've clearly got some good attacking players. I know I always go on about Joe Lolly, but people like him, Lewis Graben, all of that sort of, we've gone through that quite a few times. But do they need Shaw up at the back? Yeah, is he the man to do that? Yeah. So even as a Forest fan, even if he has that negative image, I would take that anyway. But I think he's astute enough a manager to blend the two together. You're not going to have that many good attacking players and then try and get 11 men behind the ball every week. You've got to find a compromise between the two. As the season goes by and we get to another window, then you might start to see a bit more of his philosophy. But I would imagine between now and the next window, it's going to be a case of, shoring up the back four, but can we still release those front players to go and try and work a bit of magic, which they haven't done as of yet. But, we've discussed maybe why that was earlier.
And Craig, finally for you, I'll let you be the final voice of reason here. As we mentioned about who might have been in charge of the transfers in the summer, Charlie's alluded to some of the attacking players still there. If you're a manager, as you are in non-league, if you were offered that Forest job and you were walking in like Chris Hughton is this week, you'd probably be quite pleased with the squad you've got. So what are your expectations for Forest?
No, to be honest, I'm just looking at the Forest signings from the summer. And
Brilliant.
It's really good side. It's obviously, you said a lot, Taylor. Tyler Blackett from Reading on the 3. Jack Colback's come back. He had a previous loan spell. Now he's back in the side. Yeah, Harry Hart is absolutely. I think it's something in centre midfield you need. Fights, battles, he puts a foot in. Scott McKenna, another defender from Aberdeen. So looking at it, it's good signings. As we all said, he has to get used to these players because obviously they're obviously not his signings. But I presume he's obviously watched the last few games and probably seen where he might change it compared to what Lamouchi did. So I think, to be honest, Forest will be fine. I think once he's get his foot down, he'll probably win the first game, and we don't know who we've got next because I haven't got done next week's schedule for the predictions. But they'll probably win it, and we're like, oh, he's a genius.
Sorry, they've got Blackburn next.
Okay. Where's that? Oh, it's probably
at Ewood Park, and then Rotherham, and then Derby, then Luton.
4 tough games, especially when you've got Derby. When you put Hughton wins against Derby, he's a made man already.
Good timing for him. But the final question I'm going to ask, I want one word from each of you. So firstly, Craig, pre-season, you predicted Nottingham Forest to get into the playoffs. They've lost their first 4 games. Now they have Chris Hughton. In one word, will your prediction still be correct?
No.
Interesting. And Charlie Betts just. Even worse for Charlie Betts, though, because you, pre-season, as you alluded to, predicted them to finish second. In one word, with Chris Hughton in charge now, are you sticking by that or a regret? Yes or no?
I'm going to go yes. I know it's one word and I can't elaborate on that, but it's perfect. For me, it's the perfect mix. The squad they've got, the manager they've got now, the infrastructure and the fans base that they would have, and the fans hopefully come back. For me, I know that's not a one-word answer now.
I was going to say, it's the best one-word answer I've ever had.
I'm just saying, for me, it's the perfect storm now for them to have a massive unbeaten run right up the table.
Well, let's say they need to get on a really good run because obviously they're 9 points behind the top 6 probably. So, yeah, obviously we all know the championship is bloody hard to predict. So when obviously you get on form and then they're back right up there. So, but this is the thing, championship, we don't know.
Yeah,
so
I mean. I know it's a different league, but I remember Plymouth Argyle when the relegation zone went out at Christmas, and they might have only made the playoffs, but still.
Yeah, they made the playoffs. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that was in a lot less games than this. So I can't see why they can't do it personally. Anyway.
Couldn't agree more. I'll still have them to go in the playoffs as I predicted pre-season. I'm in complete agreement. Thank you both for your time. I do appreciate you joining us today. We'll be back this time next week following the international break with our Game Week 5 Championship predictions. I do hope you'll come and join us for that. If you did enjoy this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for regular content from the podcast. Our Northern Irish Premiership predictions coming later this week and then back with Game Week 5 next week. Thank you for joining us. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3 and we'll all see you next time.